You know, when you think about the ultimate score in any field.
Right, like a flawless routine in elite gymnastics.
Exactly. Or a perfect batting average in baseball. There is always this underlying assumption that absolute perfection is practically impossible.
Yeah, we just accept that there's always a margin of error.
Right, like a slight wobble on the landing or a missed swing. The universe just, it demands friction.
Well, in statistical modeling, we actually refer to that as an asymptotic limit.
Okay, an asymptotic limit.
Yeah, you can push a trend line closer and closer to the ceiling, but mathematically and practically, you never actually touch it.
Because there's always some systemic drag.
Exactly. Especially when you're measuring human behavior on a massive national scale.
But today, we were looking at a presentation deck for this deep dive, and it's backed by this massive United Nations data set.
Spanning from 1990 all the way to 2023, right?
Yeah, 3 decades of data. And right on the first page of our sources, there's this giant, almost impossible number just staring back at us.
The 0.999.
0.999.999.
Which is a number that immediately makes any data scientist, sit up and lean closer to the monitor.
Because it suggests a system that has virtually eliminated friction.
Absolutely. It's practically unheard of.
And we are going to reveal exactly what that 0.999 measures in just a few minutes. But I'll tell you this up front. It isn't a sports statistic.
No, definitely not.
It's actually a nation's ultimate score in the pursuit of absolute social fairness.
And the country behind that number is Croatia.
Right, Croatia. And our mission for this deep dive is to decode how this specific nation pulled this off.
Because the historical context here is crucial.
Oh, totally. I mean, we are talking about a country that experienced intense regional conflict and turbulence in the 1990s.
Right. It wasn't a stable starting point at all.
Yet they somehow transformed into a global model for balanced, equitable growth.
And we're going to extract the exact mechanisms of what our sources call this, the Eastern European model.
So you, the listener, can understand the real-world blueprint for how a society actually grows.
Because that transition from regional conflict to a global model is precisely why this data is so compelling.
Right, because usually growth comes with a catch.
A massive catch. Globally, rapid economic recovery and subsequent growth usually come with a really severe side effect.
Like widening wealth gap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is treated almost as a law of economic physics.
Yeah.
As a country rapidly develops and aggregate wealth increases, the internal wealth gap widens.
And structural inequalities just sort of deepen.
Deepen or stubbornly persist, particularly gender inequalities.
So the economic engine runs hot, but it leaves marginalized groups behind in the exhaust.
That's a great way to put it. Yet looking at this UN tracking data over the past 30 years, Croatia seemingly defied that economic gravity.
They really did. They experienced a massive leap in human development.
But they managed to outpace many highly developed legacy economies in achieving near absolute social equality.
Which is wild. So I want you, the listener, to think about your own country or, your own local community right now.
Think about the new high-rises going up.
Yeah, the tech booms, the neighborhood gentrification. What if growth didn't inherently require leaving vulnerable populations behind?
What if a society could grow significantly richer and significantly fairer at the exact same time?
Right. And to understand how Croatia managed this, we have to start by looking at the foundation.
The baseline metric.
Exactly. The baseline metric of our sources, which is the Human Development Index, or HDI.
And the HDI is essentially the global gold standard for measuring a country's baseline achievement.
Because for decades, international organizations primarily judged a country's success by its gross domestic product, right? Its GDP.
Right. If the GDP went up, the country was succeeding.
But the architects of the HDI realized that measuring gross capital tells you absolutely nothing about the lived reality of the citizens.
No, it doesn't. So the HDI was created to force policymakers to answer a completely different set of questions.
It's like, are your people living long, healthy lives?
Do they have access to knowledge and education?
Do they have a decent standard of living?
Right. It's a composite score that forces a country to prove its wealth is actually doing something useful.
Okay, let's unpack this. Looking at the trend line for Croatia from 1995 to 2023, the growth is incredibly steep.
And more importantly, it's unrelenting.
Yeah. They started at an HDI of 0.713 back in 1995, right in the direct aftermath all that regional instability.
And by 2023, they hit a highly advanced 0.900.
Wow, 0.90.
Yeah. And to place that into a global perspective, The world average for HDI in 2023 sat much lower, at just 0.756.
That's a huge gap.
It is. And the shape of Croatia's curve is highly unusual.
Because maintaining a steep HDI curve over 30 years has to require immense structural adaptation.
Absolutely. Typically, a developing nation can make rapid early gains.
Like grabbing low-hanging fruit.
Exactly. If you mandate basic childhood vaccines and build a few hundred primary schools, your score will naturally jump from, say, 0.5 to 0.7.
But then they hit a wall.
Right. Almost inevitably, countries hit a plateau. Moving from 0.7 to 0.8 is difficult.
But moving from 0.8 to a 0.9 to 0.0.
That requires compounding systemic resilience. It requires transitioning from basic survival infrastructure to elite, highly specialized societal support systems.
Right. I think of HDI like a three-legged stool. Health, education, standard of living.
That's a good analogy.
If one leg is shorter than the others, the whole country wobbles. Croatia didn't just lengthen the legs, they reinforced the joints.
And they achieved this transition while simultaneously navigating the post-conflict realities of the 90s.
Completely restructuring their economy.
And undergoing the rigorous preparations required for their eventual integration into the European Union.
They were essentially redesigning the airplane while it was already in the air.
Exactly.
But I actually have to push back on the data here for a second.
Oh, go ahead.
Our sources clearly show that a 0.900 raw HDI score puts Croatia at 41st globally.
Right. 41st.
Now, being 41st is undeniably a massive achievement, but it is not number one.
No, it's not.
There are 40 other countries ahead of them on the raw scoreboard. So why are the researchers dedicating this massive analysis to positioning Croatia as a global model?
Well, your skepticism is warranted. But if we merely look at the raw leaderboard, we miss the actual narrative of the data.
Okay, how so?
The true marvel of the Croatian model is not the raw score of 0.900 itself. It's the underlying quality and the systemic distribution of that score.
Meaning how that score actually plays out across the population.
Yes. If you look at the gap between the world average of 0.756 and Croatia's 0.900, you are witnessing the difference between a highly volatile society.
Where your quality of life is totally unpredictable depending on your geography or your class.
Exactly. Versus a society with incredibly robust, resilient infrastructures that catch you if you fall.
So a 0.756 world average represents massive disparities in daily quality of life.
Right. And as we unpack the deeper metrics, we will see that many of those legacy economies ranked in the top 40 have severe hidden fractures.
They look great on paper, but there are cracks in the foundation.
They boast high average scores, but those scores are propped up by immense internal inequalities.
Ah, I see.
Croatia's distinct advantage is how thoroughly and evenly their development is distributed across their entire population.
So the 0.9 isn't just a vanity metric inflated by a wealthy upper class. It's a reflection of the median reality.
Precisely.
To understand how they constructed that reality without the hidden fractures you mentioned, we have to look at the specific engines driving the score.
We can't get a high score without healthy, educated citizens.
Exactly. Let's look at the twin engines of human development, health and education, and examine how they fueled Croatia's massive wealth catch-up.
Breaking down the HDI into its specific components reveals a really stark divergence from the global baseline.
Let's start with the health engine.
Okay. In Croatia, the life expectancy at birth is currently 78.6 years.
Which significantly outpaces the global average.
Right. The global average is 73.4 years.
So that's over 5 extra years of expected life.
And it is so easy to read that as just a minor statistical bump.
But it's not. Let's pause and really think about the actual real-world mechanics of 5 additional years of life expectancy across an entire national population.
It completely alters the economic and social fabric.
Right. It means an entire generation of skilled tradespeople, teachers, and professionals remain active in the community longer.
Yes, and it means grandparents are present to provide decentralized childcare.
Which is huge. That drastically shifts the economic burden on young parents.
Absolutely. It also means the massive, crushing costs of end-of-life medical care are delayed.
So the state can reallocate those funds into proactive, preventative health care rather than reactive triage.
You are touching on the exact mechanism of demographic dividends. A longer health span doesn't just add years to the end of a life, it stretches the productive, stable middle years.
Wow. Okay, and how does this pair with the second engine? Education.
It pairs directly. The expected years of schooling in Croatia is an astonishing 16.3 years.
16.3 years. Compare that to the global average.
The global average is only 13.0 years.
So that is an extra 3.3 years of expected schooling.
And again, the mechanics of that are profound.
Yeah, because a global average of 13 years generally means a population that finishes basic secondary school like high school and immediately enters the labor force.
Right, but an expectation of 16.3 years fundamentally shifts the national baseline.
It means the median citizen is not just finishing high school.
No, they are completing a university degree or acquiring an advanced, highly specialized technical certification.
You are basically taking a workforce and upgrading its entire operating system, moving from basic manufacturing or service labor into a high-skilled, knowledge-based economy.
The original research text explicitly uses a term for this strategy: forward-looking investments.
Forward-looking investments.
Yeah, or Chao-Kim Buju in the Chinese source notes. It describes the intentional laying of groundwork long before the tangible payoff is expected.
So Croatia didn't wait until their economy was booming to build out their university systems.
Exactly. They didn't wait to subsidize advanced technical training. They invested heavily and aggressively in human capital, ensuring those 16.3 years of schooling long before the massive economic payout arrived.
They treated comprehensive education not as a reward for a strong economy, but as the ultimate catalyst required to build one.
That's exactly it.
So let's track that catalyst into the third component, the economy, specifically the gross national income, or GNI, per capita.
The data here is really striking. Back in 1995, Croatia's GNI per capita was $17,527.
Okay. And by 2023?
It jumped to $41,380.
Wow. It more than doubled.
Meanwhile, the global average today is still lagging behind at just $20,327.
That's incredible. But I want to propose a theory here about the timeline, because causality in economics can be really tricky.
Sure.
When a country doubles its wealth, it's easy to assume the new wealth simply paid for better schools and better hospitals.
That's the common assumption, yes.
Right. So are we sure the education created the wealth and not the other way around? Did the wealth create the education, or did the education create the wealth?
The timeline data actually provides a very clear answer to that.
Oh, yeah.
Throughout the late 1990s and into the 2000s, the investment in education and health remained incredibly steady and aggressively high.
Even while the region was still stabilizing.
Yes, even during broader economic turbulence. The raw economic growth rate, that massive spike in GNI per capita, saw its most significant targeted acceleration much later.
When was that?
Specifically after 2010, as Croatia integrated into the broader European market.
Oh, okay.
So the causality definitively flows from human capital to economic capital. The education and health systems absolutely created the localized capacity to capture the wealth when the market opened up.
It is remarkably similar to the life cycle of a technology startup.
How so?
Well, in the early years, a startup is just burning through cash. They are securing venture funding, spending years building the core product, and hiring top-tier engineering talent. That represents Croatia's aggressive investment in 16.3 years of education and public health in the 90s and 2000s. You do all of that heavy lifting long before you ever launch the product or see a massive revenue spike.
That's a great comparison.
Croatia secured their funding by building up the intellect and health of their citizens, which positioned them perfectly to capture the massive economic payout, the revenue spike in the 2010s.
That framework illustrates the timeline beautifully. However, it brings us to a critical juncture in our analysis.
It is.
Generating a high gross national income and maintaining a highly educated populace is an immense achievement. But it does not guarantee a stable society.
Right, because there are rich, educated countries that are still a mess.
Exactly. Many nations possess GNIs far exceeding Croatia's $41,380, yet they are burdened with deeply fractured, polarized societies.
So a high average wealth is a dangerous metric on its own.
Very dangerous. If a nation's economic growth is captured entirely by a small elite class while the working class stagnates, the society remains inherently fragile.
Prone to unrest and systemic collapse. Precisely. Because averages are notoriously deceptive.
They hide the extremes.
Right. Like, if we are sitting in a room together and I have $0 in my pocket and you have $10 million, our average wealth is $5 million.
Right. On a spreadsheet, we look like two very wealthy people.
But in reality, I am entirely destitute.
That is exactly the problem with relying solely on GNI or basic HDI.
So to discover how Croatia avoided this trap of the rich but divided society, we have to return to that mysterious 0.999 number we mentioned at the very beginning of the show.
Yes, the 0.999. This is Croatia's score on the Gender Development Index,
The GDI.
the GDI, in the year 2023. And this specific score places them in the absolute top tier globally.
For context, the global average GDI is currently 0.955.
Right. But we need to unpack this carefully because hitting the listener with a barrage of acronyms is the fastest way to make this sound like a textbook.
Definitely.
The UN dataset uses two parallel metrics that sound incredibly similar but measure fundamentally different mechanics of society.
The GDI, which is the 0.999, and the GII.
Right, the Gender Inequality Index. Differentiating between the two is vital.
Okay, let's break them down.
The Gender Development Index, the GDI, measures societal capabilities.
Capabilities.
Yes, it calculates how close women are to men in achieving the basic foundational components of human development we just discussed: health, education, and economic command.
So a score of 1.0 represents absolute perfect parity.
Exactly. Therefore, Croatia's 0.999 signifies that they exist at a near-perfect 1.1 ratio.
1.1.
Wow. The developmental capabilities and baseline achievements of men and women in Croatia are statistically indistinguishable.
Here's where it gets really interesting. To visualize that 0.999, think of it as a flawlessly polished mirror.
I like that.
If you hold up the societal achievements, the educational background, the expected health span, and the fundamental life capabilities of a randomly selected Croatian man and a Croatian woman, the reflection looking back is almost perfectly identical.
There is no structural distortion.
Right. If he has access to a master's degree, so does she. If she can expect to live a long, healthy life, so can he.
Which leads us directly to the second metric, the Gender Inequality Index, or GII.
Okay, so if GDI is capabilities, what is GI?
While the GDI measures the equality of capabilities, the GII measures the presence of barriers.
Years.
Right. It calculates the actual loss of potential achievement within a country caused by gender inequality across three specific vectors:
Which are?
reproductive health, societal empowerment, and the labor market. A lower GII score means there are fewer systemic walls blocking progress.
And Croatia's GII trajectory over the last 30 years is nothing short of a systemic overhaul.
It really is.
Our sources show their score experienced a cliff-like drop of 76%. It fell from 0.317 back in 1990 all the way down to just 0.074 in 2023.
A massive reduction.
Meanwhile, the global average is stubbornly stuck way up at a high 0.455.
This steep, deliberate decline is the hallmark of the Eastern European model highlighted throughout the research presentation.
Because while the rest of the world has been sluggish in dismantling gender barriers...
And in several major legacy economies, we are actually seeing a regression.
Yeah, true.
Croatia, conversely, systematically eradicated these barriers over 3 decades.
They didn't just give women the capability to succeed via education, they actively dismantled the institutional barriers that would have blocked that success.
Exactly.
But, you know, a 76% drop in inequality since 1990 is staggering. But numbers on a spreadsheet are abstract.
Sure.
I can conceptualize a 0.074 inequality score mathematically, but I want to know what it actually looks like. What does a 0.074 manifest as in the day-to-day life of a citizen?
How does the lived experience actually differ?
Right. How does the lived experience of a woman in Croatia fundamentally differ from the global baseline?
Well, to answer that, to map that abstract number onto reality, we have to shift our focus from these overarching macro indexes down to the micro-realities of public infrastructure.
Okay, let's look at the micro-realities.
We must examine the tangible pillars of female empowerment and public health resilience. And the starkest, most revealing contrast in our entire UN dataset is found in the maternal mortality ratio.
The MMR.
The MMR.
In Croatia, this ratio currently sits at a breathtakingly low 4.8 deaths per 100,000 live births.
4.8.
Let me state the global average for comparison. It is a staggering 216.1 deaths per 100,000 live births.
The gulf between 4.8 and 216.1 it's difficult to fully comprehend.
It truly is. We aren't just looking at a country that is slightly better at healthcare. We are looking at a different universe of medical security.
Absolutely.
Let's really think about the mechanics of an MMR of 4.8. It is not just about having skilled surgeons in the capital city.
No, you can't get to 4.8 just with a few good hospitals.
Exactly. Achieving a number that low requires a logistical masterpiece of public health.
It means that if a woman goes into complicated labor in a remote rural village, or on one of Croatia's many islands.
Right, they have all those islands.
Right. There is an immediate, highly coordinated emergency transport system, ambulances, helicopters, ferries, ready to move her to a surgical hub.
It means universal, proactive prenatal screening is catching complications months before the birth actually happens.
It proved the healthcare infrastructure refuses to let geography or income dictate survival.
You have pinpointed the exact mechanism. A maternal mortality ratio of 4.8 is the ultimate stress test of a nation's equity.
It demonstrates that the healthcare system protects its most vulnerable, high-risk patients without exception.
And this medical security aligns perfectly with another critical health metric, right?
Yes, the adolescent birth rate, or ABR.
In Croatia, the rate is 6.6 births per 1,000 women, ages 15 to 19.
And the global average is nearly 6 times higher.
Wow.
It's at 39.1.
39.1 globally versus 6.6 in Croatia. And we know these metrics don't operate in a vacuum. A low adolescent birth rate isn't just a health statistic, it's an educational one.
Precisely. These health realities are directly tied to the bedrock of Croatia's entire developmental transformation, educational empowerment. According to the data, an overwhelming 93.5% of Croatian women have achieved at least some secondary education.
93.5%.
Yes, that completely eclipses the global average, which languishes at 62.0%.
I want you, the listener, to really process that 62% global average. Think about how much human potential is lost globally, because nearly 38% of women on Earth never even make it to secondary education.
They are sidelined from the modern knowledge economy before they even have a chance to understand it.
By ensuring 93.5% of women pass through secondary education, Croatia essentially unlocked 100% of its brain trust. They refused to waste half of their national potential.
The research identifies this specific metric secondary education for women as the absolute cornerstone of female empowerment in the Croatia model.
The cornerstone?
Yes. When you educate women past the primary level at a near universal rate of 93.5%, every other societal metric naturally and inevitably follows suit.
Adolescent birth rates naturally plummet to 6.6 because young women are physically in classrooms,
formulating long-term career trajectories,
and gaining the autonomy to control their own futures.
Furthermore, their participation in civil society, local governance, and national decision-making naturally scales up.
Which is perfectly reflected in the political data the UN tracked.
Let's look at the parliament numbers.
Women currently hold 31.8% of parliamentary seats in Croatia. That beats the global average of 26.5%.
It is a direct, undeniable pipeline.
Universal education leads to bodily autonomy and health security,
which leads to active political participation,
which in turn results in legislation that continually funds and reinforces those exact same education and health systems.
It is a self-sustaining, virtuous cycle.
We must also consider the profound psychological impact of this cycle on the national consciousness.
What do you mean?
Well, what does it do to the baseline psychology of an entire generation of women when maternal mortality is effectively eradicated as a daily fear?
Oh, that's a profound point.
When entering a hospital to give birth is no longer viewed as a potential death sentence, and when you can turn on the national news and see political representation that is highly visible, normalized, and actively shaping policy.
It generates a foundational layer of societal security.
Right. Security that encourages economic risk-taking, entrepreneurship, and long-term community planning.
It's structural empowerment from the ground up.
It sounds like a utopia. But as a natural skeptic, whenever a data set starts painting a picture of a flawless utopia, my alarm bells start ringing.
Naturally.
Is it perfect?
Yeah.
There has to be a catch, right? There has to be systemic friction somewhere. Where is the weak point in the Croatian model?
Your skepticism is necessary, and the UN researchers do not hide the flaws in the data. There is a specific vulnerability.
Okay, what is it?
The analysis turns it the last mile challenge.
The last mile.
Right. Despite achieving that miraculous 0.999 GDI, the near-perfect parity in health and education capabilities, there's a stubborn, persistent gap remaining in the labor market.
The labor force participation rate? Let's examine the exact numbers on that.
Women's labor force participation in Croatia sits at 47.3%.
Okay. And male participation?
While male participation is at 57.6%.
So, despite equal education and equal health, we are still looking at roughly a 10% gap in actual workforce engagement.
This is the last mile of policy improvement. It is a hurdle that Croatia, alongside nearly every highly developed economy globally, is still struggling to clear.
Even with perfect education.
Yes, you can engineer perfect educational parity and world-class healthcare, but societal norms and rigid market structures still generate systemic friction.
You're talking about structures regarding domestic labor, childcare responsibilities, and family leave.
Exactly. eradicating implicit biases in corporate hiring practices, or restructuring a modern economy to genuinely, seamlessly support dual-income families without penalizing motherhood.
That remains the hardest and final barrier to absolute parity.
It's a stubborn global trend, and Croatia is not immune to it.
So the labor market isn't perfectly equal yet, but we have to ask how that roughly 10% workforce gap actually affects the overall fairness of the country's wealth distribution.
Right, the broader economic picture.
If we zoom out from gender specifically and look at the entire population, rural, urban, young, old, how much of Croatia's massive developmental progress is actually lost to internal inequality?
To measure the true cost of inequality, we utilize one of the most revealing metrics in the entire source deck.
Which is?
The inequality-adjusted HDI, or the IHDI.
Okay, let's build a mental model for the IHDI because it's a brilliant concept.
It really is.
Instead of the tired old analogy of slicing a pie, let's think about a nation's wealth and development like a city's municipal water system.
Okay, I'm following.
The standard HDI we talked about at the beginning, the TOPR 900, tells us how much total water is in the city's main reservoir. It tells us the city is rich in resources.
Right.
But the IHDI measures the actual water pressure in the types of every individual house.
Oh, that's perfect.
If the reservoir is massive, but the pipes only deliver water to the mansions on the hill while the apartments in the valley get a trickle, your system is failing.
So the IHDI penalizes a country's score based on how many people are cut off from the main supply.
Exactly. So what does this all mean when we look at the global numbers?
Well, globally, when you adjust overall human development for internal inequality, when you check the water pressure in everyone's pipes, the global HDI shrinks by a massive 22.0%.
22%.
Yeah.
That means, on a global scale, nearly a quarter of all human development progress, all that wealth and medical advancement, is essentially walled off from the general public.
It's hoarded by a localized elite.
Right. Driven largely by extreme income inequality.
Exactly. The global infrastructure is highly inefficient at distribution. Now, observe Croatia's IHDI data.
Okay.
When the UN applies the exact same inequality penalty to Croatia, their HDI shrinks by a mere 6.9%.
Only 6.9%.
Just 6.9%.
That is a staggering contrast.
Well,
The rest of the world loses nearly a quarter of its progress to inequality. Croatia loses only a fraction.
A 6.9% loss is a masterclass in civic policy. The researchers refer to it as an inequality shield.
An inequality shield, I love that.
It proves that Croatia's wealth, health infrastructure, and educational resources are distributed with an exceptionally high degree of fairness across rural and urban divides, across gender lines, and across income brackets.
So, returning to the plumbing analogy.
It implies they have engineered a highly functioning municipal plumbing system.
Through robust social security networks, progressive taxation, and equitable geographic development.
Yes, they ensure that the water pressure is strong in every single home, not just the mansions.
Which provides absolute proof that their elite 0.900 HDI is not a mirage generated by a few billionaires artificially inflating the average.
It is the daily lived reality for the vast majority of the population.
But as we move into the final phase of our analysis, we have to look at the physical cost of building this system.
Because fast growth usually burns up the environment.
Exactly. Fast growth, doubling your national income in a couple of decades, constructing world-class hospitals, running universal secondary schools, it usually requires burning a massive amount of fuel.
You are identifying the ultimate 21st century developmental dilemma.
How does a nation achieve a 0.900 quality of life without irreparably degrading the ecological environment in the process?
To quantify this, our sources introduce the final major index.
Yeah.
The PHDI,
Which stands for
the Planetary Pressures Adjusted HDI.
the environmental price tag.
Correct. The PHDI recalculates human development by factoring in a country's carbon dioxide emissions per capita, alongside its material footprint per capita.
It asks a blunt question. How much carbon are you pumping into the atmosphere? And how many raw physical resources are you extracting from the earth to sustain your high standard of living?
Resources like timber, concrete, minerals, metals.
Right. So let's establish the global baseline first.
Globally, when you adjust for CO2 and material footprint, the world standard HDI drops by 10.1%.
Okay. And when you run Croatia through the exact same PHDI calculation?
Their score drops by 11.5%.
11.5%. So at first glance, on the absolute surface of the data, it appears they are slightly worse than the global average regarding environmental impact.
But surface-level readings and statistics are often misleading. We must decode the nuance within that 11.5% drop.
Because the two variables are behaving differently.
Very differently. Let's isolate the carbon first. Croatia's per capita CO2 emissions stand at 4.4 tons.
4.4 tons.
That is actually lower than the global average, which is 4.5 tons.
Wait, really?
Yes.
That is an incredibly rare dynamic. Historically, the moment a country transitions into a highly developed high-income bracket, their carbon footprint absolutely skyrockets as industrialization and consumerism take over.
It usually goes off the charts.
To have a 0.99 or 0 HDI but emit less carbon than the global average is a massive anomaly.
It is highly anomalous. But then we must look at the second variable, their material footprint.
The sheer volume of physical resources consumed.
Right. Croatia's material footprint is notably higher, sitting at 15.5 tons per capita.
Compared to the global average of
12.7 tons.
15.5 versus 12.7. So let's theorize on this divergence. They have a lower than average carbon footprint, but a higher than average material footprint. Why the split?
It is a characteristic signature of a rapidly developing, structurally sound, high-income country.
How so?
To achieve that 0.9 HDI, Croatia is physically building out its nation. They are consuming massive amounts of concrete and steel to upgrade housing, expand public transit networks, and modernize medical facilities.
And as citizen wealth doubles, consumer purchasing of physical goods naturally rises.
Exactly. That accounts for the high 15.5 tons of material.
But the remarkably low carbon emissions of 4.4 tons
Indicate that the underlying energy grid powering this massive construction and consumption is highly efficient.
They are powering their modernization with a relatively clean energy mix.
Completely avoiding the catastrophic reliance on cheap, dirty coal that plagues nearly every other rapidly industrializing legacy economy.
I equate this to driving a car. Most countries get to the highly developed finish line by driving a gas-guzzling Hummer.
Right.
Croatia got to the same finish line, and maybe they packed the trunk heavy with materials, but they drove a hybrid.
That's a great analogy. It perfectly encapsulates what the UN data identifies as the ranking phenomena.
The ranking phenomenon.
When the UN calculates the standard raw HDI, Croatia ranks around 41st to 42nd globally.
Right, we talked about that.
But when you switch to the PHDI, when you penalize all nations for their ecological destruction and level the playing field, Croatia's global standing violently surges upward.
By how much?
By incredible 24 places.
A 24-place leap on a global leaderboard. That isn't just a minor adjustment. That is a fundamental reordering of global success.
It proves mathematically that compared to other highly developed nations, Croatia is achieving its elite quality of life with a fraction of the ecological damage.
So dozens of the legacy economies ranked above them in raw HDI completely tumble down the list once they are forced to account for their massive, unsustainable carbon footprints.
Exactly. Croatia's plus 24 rank jump emphasizes that elite human development absolutely can coexist with controlled environmental costs.
It shatters the old, tired industrial excuse that a nation must severely pollute the earth in order to drag its citizens out of poverty.
It does.
Croatia proved you can build a wealthy society, distribute that wealth evenly, and still maintain carbon emissions below the global average.
As we synthesize the entirety of this UN tracking data, three core pillars of the Croatia model clearly emerge for policymakers to study.
Let's summarize them.
First, the gender dividend. That near-perfect 0.999 GDI is the unshakable bedrock of their social stability.
By ensuring absolute equality in the foundational capabilities of health and education, they unlocked the total intellectual and economic potential of their entire population.
It proves that gender equality is not merely a moral imperative. It yields immense, quantifiable systemic strength.
And the second pillar is inequality resistance.
That miraculously low IHDI penalty of just 6.9%.
It validates the power of a strong social safety net and proactive, equitable wealth distribution.
They didn't just grow their gross domestic product, they built an inequality shield that ensured the wealth was systematically shared.
Completely bypassing the 22% loss that cripples global progress.
Finally, the third pillar, green efficiency.
That massive 24-place upward leap in the PHDI rankings.
It proves that high-speed development does not necessitate catastrophic environmental exploitation. A nation can build the robust infrastructure of tomorrow without burning up the atmosphere to achieve it.
If we step back and connect all of this to the bigger picture, Croatia's 30-year journey proves that social equity isn't a luxury item you purchase after your country gets rich.
No, it's not.
It is the very mechanism by which a society becomes sustainably rich in the first place.
That is the ultimate defining takeaway from this data set. The social fairness was not a happy byproduct of their booming wealth. The fairness was the engine that generated the wealth.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought.
Let's hear it.
We are constantly told by traditional legacy economists that a developing country must grow the GDP first and worry about wealth distribution later.
It's the standard advice.
We are told you must build the factories and generate the capital before you can possibly afford universal health care or secondary education for marginalized groups.
Right.
But looking closely at Croatia's timeline, where they aggressively front-loaded female education and universal health care decades before their actual wealth peaked, what if that classic economic advice is fundamentally backwards?
Oh, wow.
What if true, sustainable wealth is simply the inevitable byproduct of designing a society for absolute fairness?
It is a profound structural question that every global policymaker should be asking themselves as they review this exact data.
I highly encourage you, listening right now, to view your own local communities, your own city councils, and your own national policies through this new lens.
Look at the data around you.
Are your local leaders attempting to drive growth by leaving vulnerable populations behind, or are they doing the hard, early work of building the foundation for a 0.999 society? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We will catch you on the next one, but until then, keep questioning the scoreboard and look for the numbers that actually matter.